الحمد لله بخير. كيف حالكم؟
الحمد لله. Was everything?
الحمد لله.
Allah يبارك فيك.
كم
We had
مرة.
a we had a homework, yeah?
Yes.
Have you researched anything?
A little bit.
إلى ماذا يعني توصلت في بحثك؟
Uh, so basically the hadith regarding um, تحريك الإصبع
أيوه.
وإثباتها.
نعم.
So as I recall, so Shaykh al-Albani. So basically most of the riwayat from عاصم ibn Kulayb عن أبيه عن وائل ibn Hujr رضي الله عنه. So most of them or all of them except for one was with regards to having the thubut of the isba,
مم.
um, except for one which was by Zaida ibn Qudama.
يعني
Um,
رواية زائدة.
نعم. Yeah.
نعم.
So
طيب.
most scholars from what I looked at or from that I came across
Yeah.
said that this hadith is shadh, the one that he reported, and Shaykh al-Albani he made it sahih from the report of An-Nasa'i, I believe.
طب لماذا صححه؟
Good question. That one I didn't get too much into it, but I found a video of him mentioning. I can't recall too much of it, but he was mentioning with regards to the tahrik and the ithbat that like they're both like synonyms.
Okay.
And he used like the Arabic language as a proof, basically.
صح. لكن now we're going to the fiqhi aspect of it. طيب
Yeah.
what is تحريك and all. But
Yeah.
the
I
مهمة.
didn't really get to the actual
Yeah. Remember, I don't know if
mustalah.
you were you with us last week? We spoke about زيادة الثقات, the,
Yeah, I was here last week. Yes.
the addition of the thiqat, and one of the differences between the early scholars and the later scholars,
Yes.
that the later scholars they would deal with the issue of the addition of the thiqat differently.
Yes.
Yeah, we spoke about this.
So this was the main question, I believe, right?
أي نعم صحيح.
So it is if the thiqa added a word, like if he had a ziyada, is that still shad or not? That's the question, right?
Yeah, it's two aspects. One of them, if a thiqa adds comes with an addition to the hadith that it's not doesn't exist in other thiqat, or we have two narrations, a thiqa and they're all thiqat. One of them narrates it disconnected or mawquf or whatever, and one of them narrates it from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam or a higher chain. Which one should we take? So the methodology of the later scholars is, by default we take what is connected. By default we take the addition. And however, we mentioned that the early scholars they would deal with it case by case. They would deal with it case by case. And some say that al-Bukhari, he's the one who accepts the addition of the thiqat. And based on an incident where al-Bukhari accepted an addition of a thiqah. However, that doesn't mean that this is the methodology of al-Bukhari when he once added, for example, when he once accepted an addition. The generally speaking, the early scholars they would investigate each case by itself. وهذا هو الأصل. And this is الأصل. Now, what do you think Sheikh al-Albani's methodology is in addition of thiqat?
I didn't look too much into it, but I like read somewhere in one of the forums. I guess it's not really
Yeah,
authentic to say,
based
but
on the fact that he accepted the addition.
yeah. So my thought process would be that he would have taken that wording
Mm.
and on the basis that he had stronger hifz.
Okay. So are you assuming that? كيف يعني for example a ثقة contradicts another 10 ثقات.
Yeah, like I wouldn't agree with that
Mm.
thought process, but this is my assumption that
Yeah.
he would have thought. But I'm not sure what Sheikh Albani really says with regards
Yeah.
to this.
So so based on this, for example, accepting the movement of تحريك الإصبع and other things, The people usually, when they speak about Shaykh al-Albani, they would say he's from the متأخرين and he accepts the addition and whatnot. But subhanAllah, there is a case, I haven't investigated thoroughly, يعني, but there is a case where Shaykh ibn Baz, he was asked about saying إنك لا تخلف الميعاد after the dua of adhan. And he said it's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. And then Shaykh al-Albani, he actually said, no, this is an addition that is not to be accepted. طيب, this is something to, يعني, for later, inshallah ta'ala, when we want to investigate it. Inshallah ta'ala. Jazakallah khair. So the narration of Za'idah is Za'idah in terms of tahrik al-asba'. And generally speaking, the early madhahib, for example, the madhab Hanabila, is to move your hand, your finger, whenever you mention the name of Allah. And some of the scholars of hadith, especially in our time, for example, Shaykh al-Tarifi and others, they would say, based on the narrations, that what they do is from the start to the end of the tashahhud, they would be raising the finger like this.
Yes.
يشير بإصبعه. They would do ishara to the qibla. And this, the scholars said that it refers to the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. والله تعلم. So, يعني either follow madhab or you follow some of the muhaddithin, المحققين من المحدثين, يعني شيخ الطريفي, شيخ العلوان, other scholars of it. والله تعالى.
So what was Sheikh Albani's reasoning with regards to making the Sahih?
It's basically the concept of accepting the addition of thiqat.
Okay.
Yeah. However, is there more details to it? There should be more details. There should be more details because Sheikh al-Albani himself, it's narrated to us that he, in cases, rejected some of the additions. Yani if this story that I just mentioned is correct, it means that Sheikh al-Albani doesn't apply this always. Rather, in cases he would apply, he would reject some of the additions. لكن based on authenticating تحريك الإصبع في الصلاة, you would assume that it was the default methodology of Shaykh al-Albani, which is not only him, even the later scholars. رحمهم الله تعالى. And Ibn Hajar, by the way, Ibn Hajar, he criticizes this. And he says, how come theoretically you say that there is something called shudud, which is the contradiction. And based on that, shudud is not having shudud is a condition of an authentic report. And then you come and you don't apply it when it comes to the practical aspect of it, you don't apply it. So shudud happens and you call it, no, this is an accepted addition of thiqat. Ibn Hajar, he speaks about this as well, Nuzhat al-Nazar. Because Ibn Hajar himself, he explained Nuzhat al-Nazar, Nukhbatul Fikar, in his book Nuzhat al-Nazar. Jazakallah khairan. Even we said last week that sometimes the scholars would say هذا حديث صحيح الإسناد based on fulfilling these three conditions. However, they don't mean that it's ultimately authentic because there are additional two conditions for authentic report. ثم تكلمنا عن صحيح البخاري ومسلم والفرق, the difference in the conditions. If you remember was the condition of Bukhari and Muslim different in Shaykh Rashid or Shaykh Muhammad?
Bukhari's condition was that both narrators must have met each other. And Muslim was just if they lived in the same era.
Same era, and possibly they could have met one another. نعم هذا. And this is what also made Bukhari يعني superior to صحيح Muslim. طيب, فإن خف الضبط فالحسن لذاته. يعني ابن حجر here gives a definition for al-Hasan. فإن خف الضبط فالحسن لذاته. However, you should know that the early scholars, they didn't have a specific definition for Hasan. Sometimes Hasan, they would use it and they would refer to a hadith that is weak. يعني some of the early scholars, they say من حسنها فررت. Because these hadith are Hasan, I'm running away from them. Meaning they are very rare. They're not found. Or sometimes an authentic report can be called Hasan. As the Shafi'i and others, they would use the word Hasan sometimes to describe a hadith that is already authentic. So they don't always mean this istilah. To an extent, that Imam al-Dhahabi rahimahullah ta'ala, when he spoke about definitions of Hasan, after that he said, I lost hope in defining Hasan in one definition. However, what's better to do, Wallahu ta'ala alam, is to take Hasan by its linguistic meaning, being what is good in general, and then to apply it, especially when you read the books of the early scholars. However, for the sake of understanding what we're reading, then term Hasan or the Hadith al-Hasan, what is explained to be is when the dabt or the accuracy of a narrator is reduced to a certain level, then it becomes Hasan. Let me skip some of that. And we spoke about Jazakallah khair for correcting. So what I mentioned previously was was how Ibn Salah rahimahullah ta'ala described the conditions of a Tirmidhi in a definition in Hadith Hasan. However, I corrected that, and the definition that Ibn Salah rahimahullah ta'ala gave wasn't very accurate. However, the correct definition is the first condition for Hasan to a Tirmidhi, to Imam Tirmidhi rahimahullah ta'ala, is the narrator should not be accused of lying, and the hadith should not be contradicted by any of the trustworthy narrators, and also the general meaning should be affirmed through different ways. Let me skip وبكثرة طرق يصحح. We went through this. Inshallah ta'ala. I'm trying to finish by Ramadan. Inshallah. Allah help us to witness الشهر الكريم. طيب, I'll go to the new slides inshallah. So this is what we took previously. وخبر الآحاد الفرد النسبي وافقه غيره فهو المتابع وإن وجد متن يشبهه فهو الشاهد وتتبع الطرق لذلك هو الاعتبار. And lastly, we spoke about the process of اعتبار, which is a very important process, to look for متابعات and شواهد. متابعات from the same narrator, and then شواهد, other texts that would support and that would bring the same meaning, even though they are from different narrators. And this is a huge field in علم الحديث in terms of authentication and whatnot, and removing غرابة from a text. Then the Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala says, ثم المقبول إن سلم من المعارضة فهو المحكم وإن عورض بمثله فإن أمكن الجمع فمختلف الحديث أولى وثبت المتأخر فهو الناسخ والآخر المنسوخ وإلا فالترجيح ثم التوقف. هل فهمت شيء يا شيخ محمد؟ شيخ رشيد, did you is it easy to understand? أبو رقية, يعني can someone explain it? It's a bit complicated. طيب, شيخ محمد, محمد are you there?
I'm here.
طيب, هل فهمت شيء يا شيخ؟
قليلا.
طيب, ما هو المقبول؟ ما هو الحديث المقبول؟
That's accepted. So usually صحيح وحسن.
صحيح وحسن, نعم. طيب, إن سلم من المعارضة, ما معنى المعارضة؟
So if there's anything else that's going against it.
أيوة, إن سلم, if there is nothing that goes against it, contradicts it, obviously a مقبول that contradicts it, فهو المحكم. إذن we have a مقبول report, which is صحيح وحسن, that is not contradicted by another, so it becomes محكم. So, and this is most of the hadith. Most of the hadith that are صحيح and hasan are not contradicted by others. Because there is no contradiction يعني, between الأصل, that there is no contradiction between the hadith Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that are authentic. So most of the hadith there is no contradiction, and they are محكمة, meaning they are strong. طيب, وإن عورض بمثله. طيب, now the Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala speaks about a case where there is an apparent contradiction between the hadith, and this happens in the Quran. There are books, for example, Shaykh Shanqiti rahimahullah ta'ala had a book on the verses that appear to be contradicting, and it's a beautiful book يعني, to read. So here in the hadith, if there are hadith that appear to be contradicting, the Shaykh says فإن أمكن الجمع فمختلف الحديث. If we could reconcile between them, then it is called مختلف الحديث. Or if the date was affirmed for a hadith was mentioned year 7, and the other hadith that contradicts it was in year 11 or year 10, then ناسخ and منسوخ, then issue of abrogation. وإلا فالترجيح, if we couldn't find the dates for the sake of pursuing abrogation, then we do tarjih, we choose one over another. If we could not, then توقف. So here the Shaykh mentioned 4 steps. When there is some sort of contradiction between the ahadith. One of them, if we're able to join the ahadith together, then it is called مختلف الحديث. مختلف الحديث, and some of the scholars يعني I'll mention some examples here. For example, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says in the hadith, لا يؤمن عبد قوما فيخص نفسه بدعوة دونهم. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, let not someone lead people in prayer and then make dua specifically only for himself. Let not someone be the imam in salah and then he makes dua only for himself. This is a hadith. The other hadith is that the Prophet ﷺ himself in the prayer, he made dua for himself only. And he said, Allahumma ba'id bayni wa bayna khatayai, kama ba'adta bayna al-mashriq wal maghrib. Oh Allah, make distance between me and my sins, the distance between west and east. And he made dua for himself. So there is a contradiction here that appears between the two hadith. And يعني, there's many scholars who are known to reconcile between these hadith and have a lot of works done in this field. One of them is, for example, Ibn Khuzaymah rahimahullah ta'ala. Ibn Khuzaymah rahimahullah ta'ala says, and I quote, لا أعرف عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حديثين صحيحين متضادين فمن كان عنده فليأتني لأؤلف بينهما. Ibn Khuzaymah rahimahullah ta'ala says, I do not know any two ahadith that contradict one another, authentic from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So whoever had a hadith that is contradictory from the Prophet, bring it to me so I would reconcile between them. Rahimahullah ta'ala. So, for example, one of the responses is that the hadith Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam of Imam not making dua for himself specifically is for the dua that is not meant to be is the exemption is the dua that is meant to be for yourself. For example, the dua that is narrated by Prophet ﷺ in the beginning of the prayer. That one not. However, for example, when you do qunut, then this qunut should be for everyone. When you do dua in your sujood, then this dua should be included. The people behind you should also be included, because it's not a dua that is specifically narrated that should be for yourself from the Prophet ﷺ. طيب, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, he is more specific and he says this hadith specifically refers to dua al-qunut. That in qunut, you should not make dua by yourself, because people are saying Ameen, Ameen, and you make dua only for yourself. This is what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam meant. And the other hadith, for example, the Prophet ﷺ says there is no adwa, there is no contagious disease. And then he says, run away from, al-majzoom, which is a person who carries that disease. And other hadith that the scholars of hadith that appear to be contradicting, and the scholars of hadith would reconcile between them, and it's called mukhtalaful hadith. طيب, second, the Shaykh says, if you're able to know the date, then nasikh and mansukh. And nasikh and mansukh is known through ways, we'll speak about them inshallah ta'ala. And then if you can't apply any of these two steps, then you do tarjih, you choose one of them. Then if not, you do tawaqquf, you don't take by any of them, if none of these steps can be fulfilled. So the Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala, he says muhkam and then mukhtalaf al-hadith and then nasikh and mansukh. Nasikh mansukh is basically abrogation. And it is known through, for example, a verse or a hadith. For example, a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ himself, he says, I used to tell you not to visit the graveyards. ألا فزوروها فإنها تذكركم الموت. Now, then visit it because it will remind you of death. There is a hadith that clearly the Prophet says the previous ruling was abrogated. Or from a speech or saying of a Sahabi. So when the Sahabi says that some ruling were abrogated. For example, Jabir ibn Abdullah saying that the ruling of making wudu after consuming a food that was made with fire or on fire has been abrogated. So you don't need to make wudu from consuming food that was made on fire, except for the camel, as the Hanbali method. Or through knowing the date. يعني الشافعي رحمه الله تعالى, he commented on two hadith. I think it was the hadith of doing hijama while fasting. The first hadith said, let not a fasting person do hijama. The second hadith says, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu saying that I saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam doing hijama while fasting. So Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala said that the first hadith, the narrator saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I think it was in year 7. And the other hadith, Ibn Abbas saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam after that. And don't quote me on the exact dates, but the idea of Ibn Abbas narrating the hadith after and it was affirmed, as Shafi'i said, then the second abrogates the first. The second abrogates the first. Or the ijma', the consensus of the scholars, and the ijma', here it's an important point. The ijma' does not make abrogation. Rather, the ijma' reveals the abrogation. For example, there is a hadith that a person who consumes alcohol, the 4th time he shall be killed. He shall be killed. However, there is consensus among the scholars that this ruling has been abrogated. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. So these 4 steps that we mentioned previously, if we couldn't find the abrogation, then tarjih, we choose one of them. If we couldn't, then tawaqquf, we don't act by any of the reports. Wallahu ta'ala. And this is very rare. Yani. Then the Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala says, and I think we're in the 2nd page of the matan. He says, ثم المردود إما أن يكون لسقط أو طعن. Mardud, so now we finish with مقبول hadith, accepted. Now mardud that is ضعيف, that is weak. Either it is due to saqt or طعن. There's 2 reasons why we have a mardud hadith. السقط is a missing narrator. سقط الشيء يعني something that dropped. We have a missing narrator. And then طعن is to accuse. And طعن linguistically يعني, for example, طعن can be stabbing, when you stab someone. However, this طعن here is a verbal طعن, wherein the scholars of jarh and ta'dil, they يطعنوا, meaning they attack a person due to certain reasons. So these 2, سقط and طعن, are the reason why a hadith is ضعيف, or is mardud, or is rejected. And then the Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala says, والسقط إما أن يكون من مبادئ السند من مصنف أو من آخر بعد التابعي أو غير ذلك. فالأول المعلق، والثاني المرسل، والثالث إن كان باثنين فصاعدا مع التوالي فهو المعضل، وإلا فالمنقطع، ثم قد يكون واضحا أو خفيا. He says this سقط. So we mentioned 2 reasons for rejecting a hadith. One of them is سقط, a missing narrator. Then the Shaykh says that there is something called mu'allaq. He mentions the first one, a missed narrator in the beginning of the chain. So I narrate a hadith from certain narrators. Between me and them, there is a missing link. This is called mu'allaq. It's hanging. And then mursal. Mursal is when a tabi'i narrates of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When a tabi'i says, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. However, if a tabi'i says, I heard a Sahabi, without mentioning his name, said that the Prophet said, then this is not mursal. Because the Sahaba or Udul, they have adala, then it's a connected hadith. Then the third, Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala says, munqati'. Here, I didn't mention that in order. Inqita' is in the middle of the chain. So not from me initiating chain, nor from the tabi'i. It is in the middle. It is called munqati', taraf. And then mu'dal. Mu'dal is a specific type of munqati'. This is when we have 2 narrators, one after another, missing from the link, which makes the job harder. This is called mu'dal, which is more problematic. So mu'dal is basically they're all disconnections. They're all disconnections. However, the scholars of hadith, they want to be specific in using the type of disconnection. So they said there is something called mu'allaq, there's something called mursal, there is something called munqati', and there is something called mu'dal. Then the Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala says, talking further about saqat, ثم قد يكون واضحا أو خفيا. The saqat can be either clear, easily identified, or hidden. Not easily identified. A clear انقطاع. You as or me as a new student of hadith, we read a hadith, there is 2 narrations. There is 2 narrators, for example, that we want to read about. One of them is born in year 150, and one of them died in 150. The other was born in 150. And he narrates of that man. So you would know that there is this connection, because you can't have you didn't meet each other, or at least when you met one another, you were like a couple of days old. So this is an easily understood saqat, missing narrator in the hadith. This is واضح. This is clear. The other is a hidden disconnection, a hidden missing of a narrator. And this is when you have a narrator narrating from the other, and they both lived in the same time. And they both, for example, were in this close location where they could have met one another. However, it is affirmed, you affirm that one of them did not hear from the other. So it becomes what we call saqat, missing narrator. Wallah ta'ala. And this is more difficult to identify. This is more difficult to identify. Wallah ta'ala. And then the Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala says that this second would lead to something called tadlis. And tadlis is a huge topic, but mainly there's two types of tadlis that can summarize other types of tadlis. One of them is tadlis isnad, the tadlis in chains, and the other tadlis in shuyukh, in teachers. So what is the definition of tadlis in isnad? To narrate from his sheikh what he did not hear, using terms that would appear or would give the impression as if he heard it from his sheikh. So for example, I say, I narrate a hadith and I say, I narrate it from my sheikh. You don't know whether I really sat with my sheikh and I heard it, or that it's from my sheikh. Yani, maybe I heard it from one of my colleagues. Maybe I heard it from one of the classmates. It doesn't really says that definitely I heard it from the sheikh. If I say, for example, حدثني شيخي, the sheikh told me, this is an explicit term referring that the sheikh spoke to me directly and I heard it from him. But if I say the sheikh said, you don't know whether the sheikh said and I heard him, or the sheikh said because someone told me the sheikh said. So this is called tadlis, and some of the mashayikh would do that. For example, they want to say that, some of the narrators, sorry, they want to say that we met many mashayikh. We met that sheikh. Yani there is a sheikh that I never met in my life, and I say, the sheikh said this and that, and you think that I sat with the sheikh, even though there is a disconnection that I didn't hear from the sheikh directly. The other is, or another example that can be under tadlis al-isnad, is tadlis taswiyah, to narrate from a thiqa sheikh and remove the weak narrator in the chain. Remove the weak narrator between two thiqat who have met one another. So you have two thiqat that met one another. Between them, there is a weak narrator, but you want to beautify your chain. You want to do tajweed of the chain. Tajweed to make something better. So you get rid of the weak narrator, and it's very hard to identify that these people, there is a weak narrator between them. And this is the process of i'tibar that we mentioned previously, where you're going to compare this narration with other narrations and it's weak. Tadlis of shuyukh, when a narrator describes his teacher in ways to give the impression that it is a different sheikh. And this is one of the examples of it. So for example, I think al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, he is known to do some of that. So he would mention his sheikh, and then another occasion he would mention completely different name, but it is his sheikh. For example, I would say, I heard the hadith, I narrate a hadith from Sheikh Abdullah Hawari, for example, or Sheikh Ali Jalabna. And then after that, I would say I heard the hadith from Abu Anas al-Urduni, which is the same person. He's Ali Jalabna, same person. And this is called tadlis shuyukh, tadlis of teachers. People usually would do that for the sake of, giving the impression that they had met a lot of mashayikh. And this doesn't necessarily harm the adala. However, this is the nature of a human being, sometimes make you do, and you should be aware of that. You should be aware of that. And some of the scholars were very harsh on this type of tadlis. It's narrated of, I think, Shu'bah, that he said, if I lie, it is more beloved to me than doing tadlis. He said, tadlisu akhul kadhib. He said, tadlis is akhul kadhib, is like lying. Wallahu ta'ala alam. We'll stop here, inshallah ta'ala. And then after that, we'll continue the text of Nukhbatul Fikar, and it's good to go to the PDF file and know where we got up to, and then read from the start to where we got up to. Whatever is not clear, reach out inshallah ta'ala on WhatsApp, or we can clarify. One of the things that would help us understand better is to learn with the intention of teaching. To learn with the intention of teaching, so we can be more present. يعني والله تعالى أعلم. جزاكم الله خيرا. سبحانك الله وبحمدك. نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. If there's no questions, inshallah ta'ala, we'll stop here.